City Council District 7 Forum. We're at the Islamic Cultural Center. We're also airing live via Community Media Access Collaborative, which is co-sponsoring tonight's event with gvwire.com and Fresno's leading young professionals. In addition, you can watch on gvwire.com where we're streaming live. I'm Bill McEwen, your moderator and GV Wire News Director. Tonight, 3 candidates will field questions from our panelists and questions from our community. In addition, scratch that. Let's just go ahead and meet the candidates in alphabetical order, beginning with Nelson Esparza.
That's me first. Thank you, Bill. Thank you to all the hosts, the organizers of this forum. Great to be here tonight. My name is Nelson Esparza, running for Fresno City Council in District number 7, and I'm running to build the future of our city together with the residents of District 7. My day job is I teach economics at Fresno City College. I currently serve Central Fresno and South Fresno on the Fresno County Board of Education.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Beva Islas, and I'm running to make history. When I'm elected, I will be the first woman to represent District 7. I was born in the district, my children were born in the district, and I've been working in the district for over a decade. As the director and founder of Cultiva la Salud, I've raised over $10 million in grant funds in service to Fresno. My hope is to represent this district because I believe this district has not been receiving its fair share of investments and development by the city. I believe in community, I'm dedicated to progress, and I believe in servant leadership, and I'm ready to serve the district.
Thank you. Brian Whalen.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us and for everyone getting together here. My name is Brian Whelan, and I've lived in District 7 going on 10 years. I grew up in Fresno, attended high school in the district. I practice law. I represent people with a variety of issues. I help a lot of people with employee rights. My goal and drive to be a council person for District 7 is to lift up the neighborhoods and the neighbors in District 7. I've been the victim of crime in my house and had a lot of issues with neighbors having similar problems. And so I'm trying to bring people together to lift up communities and help with public safety.
Thank you. And now it's time to meet our panelists, and we'll begin with Sevag Tatiosian.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sevag Tatiosian, raised here in Fresno. I've got a program called Central Valley Ledger. That program has been on television and radio since 2006, covering local matters.
My name is Christina Garavidian. I'm a local attorney, and then I'm a board member on Fresno's Leading Young Professionals. And while we're not a political organization, we encourage our members to get involved in their community and in politics.
My name is David Taub, reporter with GV Wire on gvwire.com. And democracy thrives when a free press is able to ask questions of its leaders.
And our timekeeper tonight is Tori D'Ambrosia from Fresno's Leading Young Professionals. And we do have a few rules tonight. We want it to be flexible, fun, and very enlightening. But I encourage all the candidates to follow the rules so that everybody has an opportunity to say where they stand on the issues. We also want to cover as much ground as we can over these 90 minutes. If someone dances around to questions, filibusters, either I will intervene or I'm sure our panelists will intervene and ask you to answer the question directly. If a candidate raises a point about one of the other candidates, there will be time for rebuttal. We want a good, clean fight or discussion. And we'll also have 2 sessions where we open up and make it a debate about certain topics. And we want you to think of it as a preview to how the winning candidate might interact with his or her colleagues on the Fresno City Council. Now I'm going to get the ball rolling with questions, specific questions for each candidate. And I have to say that all of these questions were submitted from the public. We call them icebreakers. They might make you sweat a little bit because I could see the thinking going on behind the question. And we'll start with Nelson on first. And the question is this: you serve now on the Fresno County Education Board. Why are you attempting to leave that position? And will you serve a full term if elected to the city council? In addition, someone else asked, if you win and have campaign funds left over, would you donate them to help pay for the special election?
So I get 1 minute to answer that question?
Yeah, I
All
think
right,
you can do it.
fantastic.
You're a smart guy.
This is my favorite question. I've been getting it since day one. So listen, I am committing to all of you watching, to all my residents in District 7, to serve out a full term on the Fresno City Council. The reason I'm running for Fresno City Council, as I noted earlier, is to build the future of our city together. What I mean by that is it's really about having an impact in our community. And while it's been really a privilege to serve in elected office, to represent most of the residents of District 7 already, I'm going back to those very same folks. I'm not leaving them. I'm not going anywhere. These are the same people who elected me the first time, and I'm counting on them to elect me a second time to represent them in a different capacity at City Hall. So it's up to them. I know the pundits have another story, but on June 5th, the residents of District 7 will speak. With respect to the school board seat, once I do swear into the city council, I do believe is the authority of my board, the County Board of Education, to do an appointment and to avoid a special election. That was a big. I asked the legal counsel, and I believe the county board does have the authority to appoint. If that ends up not being the case, absolutely, I'm willing to pitch in and pitch in my fair share to finance that special election.
Thank you for that, Nelson. Veva, much of your fundraising support has come from outside Fresno. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, I have friends everywhere. And I'm lucky that because of the work that I've been doing for the last decade, that I've been able to make connections with people who believe in me and my values. So I'm happy to compare notes about who's been investing in my campaign with either of my opponents. But I'm very proud of the people who are believing in me and investing in me in this campaign.
Thank you. Brian, would you support a sanctuary city ordinance for Fresno?
I support what is currently in place right now with respect to how the police are policing and not asking questions about immigration status. That's a problem that exists right now with how the county is addressing both the confluence of the state and federal issues. I don't want to disturb that balance that exists right now within the city and ask that police to start enforcing immigration. That's not their role. That's the role of ICE. And one of the things that I think is very important is that irrespective of your citizenship or your document status, that you don't have any fear about reprisal or retaliation or deportation if you're going to report any activity or crime in your area. I know that there are a number of people that live in our community, specifically in District 7, that are undocumented. In fact, I've met quite a few of them, and quite a few have actually expressed interest in helping and have actually helped on the campaign. But there are a number of people that are telling me that they're concerned about talking to the police because they don't want the police to come out and somehow enforce the immigration rules and do them basically a disservice because they're reporting to be a good steward of the community, and in turn they get deported. So I would not change that policy. I support the people in my district. I want to make sure that people don't have fear to report crime, and I want to make sure that people do in fact engage. And one of the things that I've been doing right now.
So let's wrap it up right
Yes.
there. You've made it very clear. Let's turn to our panelists now, and we'll begin with Savog.
So District 7 has a lot of canal space. What are your plans when it comes to that space? And how would you get buy-in from the various partners? Because the canals run throughout District 7, and that's a lot of space there.
And Veva takes that first.
Sure. I think that the canal space is a double-edged sword. Right now, District 7 receives some of the highest rates of illegal dumping in our city. And I do believe it's because of some of the frontage roads and the canal areas where people are dumping. So we definitely need to make sure that we're keeping it clean. One of the things that I'm excited about is the fact that we do have a Midtown Trail that will be a linear park along the canal banks, and it'll become an asset to both those property owners and residents who live in the district. So I think things like that are really great investments in terms of promoting the district and bringing in the investments that my residents deserve.
Brian, what about the canals?
Well, I think that the canals present somewhat of an attractive nuisance. I know that I live next to the canals, and I heard a lot of neighbors complain about how they're basically a dumping ground that has been a little bit off the beaten path, where people will drive up and dump a lot of stuff, and then kids will play next to the canal. One of the things that I think is very important for the neighbors in District 7 is to realize that we need to make more investments in our park system, in our community, and I am trying to explore ways with neighbors to be a little more proactive with addressing some of the problems that we have on the canals. I have kind of looked into the Midtown Trail and exploring that as an option to basically address some of the problems that the attractive nuisance phenomenon creates with the canals.
Thank you. Nelson?
Absolutely. So I'm the third person to answer this question, and I can't say I have much more of a creative response. I have to agree with both of the other candidates. I do actually live just south, directly south of one of the canals, south of Cedar and McKinley. So this is something that I live, right? I think more than any of the other two candidates. I do see the dumping. I experienced it. I don't personally feel super comfortable taking my family, for a stroll along the way. I do see others take advantage of it. And so, like one of the other candidates referenced, a double-edged sword. In terms of the dumping that does take place, whether it's by a canal or by the railroad off of Floridora or wherever it might be in the district, the city's got to do a better job of that public investment, cleaning up our, the streets or wherever that dumping is occurring.
Thank you. And Christina Garabedian will ask the next question. She's from Fresno's Leading Young Professionals, and Brian will have the first answer on this one.
If elected to represent District 7, how will you continue working to better Blackstone as a main road through town?
Well, one of the things that I have been doing throughout this campaign is meeting with neighbors and getting their input about different solutions to different problems, because I think that at different places on Blackstone you have different events and problems that are going on. You look at, for instance, what's happening next to Dakota and Blackstone, and I've talked to the people at the Jiffy Lube there, and they're talking about how there's lots of crime and activities that are going on immediately in the vicinity. And so I think that it requires kind of getting the stakeholders involved, those that are the lifeblood of Blackstone, the business owners that are there, and getting more input from them in addressing some of these endemic problems that spill into their businesses, and also partnering with some of the existing businesses that are in other areas that are looking to develop. For instance, Granville has property right there on Blackstone and Clinton, and I know that there's some efforts that are being made to develop on Blackstone and kind of beautify the corridor.
Thank you. Nelson?
Absolutely. So I have sort of three parts to my answer. So I have been in touch and met actively with the organizers of the Better Blackstone Initiative. They're organizing folks in the neighborhoods that surround the main corridor, right? And so in part, like many of the policies I will implement, it will be through the input of the folks living directly there. I think there's an issue with some of the activity and some of the blights that has taken place on Blackstone that makes it maybe not so favorable or a less favorable spot to do business. With regards to the prostitution and the human trafficking, these are issues. This is an issue that we need to partner with our DA's office, the state attorney general, and so on, and other jurisdictions to be able to structurally address that issue in particular. With respect to tackling blight, I'm going to get to that, and I'm sure there will be an opportunity for me to talk about tackling blight. on Blackstone and all the main corridors.
Thank you. Veva, what about Blackstone Avenue?
Yeah.
Making it more appealing and more commercial activity.
You know, I like looking at the positive, and there's been so much already happening on Blackstone, from the development that's happening at Manchester Center to the bus rapid transit, and I think that's definitely the course we need to stay on. I believe that, you know, one of the groups that was referenced, Fresno Metro Ministry, has been a longtime partner with me. They've been a subcontractor. So I want to make sure that we are helping to position organizations with that dedication to serve community in continuing to do just that. One of my assets is that I have brought over $10 million of grant funds to Fresno, and I want to continue to do that to help support the type of revitalization that we're seeing already. So that's my stance. I would like to continue down the trajectory that we're already going.
And Brian, you want to say anything on the human trafficking side, which was raised by Nelson or Veva?
So are the rules, if it's directed at the other
No,
candidate,
I
they get to
just
respond?
give an opportunity that it was raised. If you wish to address it, you'll have a chance to.
Sure. I don't think there's anyone that's in support of human trafficking. I attended recently, there was an event that was held last week that was hosted by Lisa Smitkamp, the DA, and also Chief Jerry Dyer, raising funds to raise awareness and also to combat human trafficking. And they have some pretty amazing and moving stories that develop, and a lot of that, unfortunately, a lot of the activity is kind of right through our area, and so it is absolutely something that has to be addressed, both in partnership with the police and also with the DA. And I think for that reason, kind of what I talked about at the outset in terms of involving the community, which is something that I'm doing, is to make sure that people aren't concerned about retaliation, about reporting. And what I'm trying to do is get the community more engaged through this campaign, and that's hopefully something that will continue in the coming weeks. And also, I'm getting a red
Yes.
flashing card.
Veva,
with that,
anything to add?
opposed.
Sure. You know, I would say that if we're really concerned about solving the issue of human trafficking, that we have to make sure that women have access to equal pay, where they can afford to live a healthy, decent life and support their families. Many of the issues that are impacting, in particular, low-income women of color are that there are many barriers to their academic achievement and success. There are very limited employment opportunities, and so the choices become very limited. You know, I don't blame someone for wanting to survive and doing whatever they can to survive. I do think that we solve it by investing early and keeping women in school and allowing educational opportunities.
Thank you, and now we'll complete the first round of questions from the panelists with David Taub from GV Wire, and first person answering will be Nelson Esparza.
Candidates, I want to hear your plans to add more market rate and affordable housing, not only in District 7, but the city of Fresno as a whole.
Plans to add more.
So more housing. How are you going to get more affordable housing, more market rate housing? Because more housing, better for everybody.
Sure, absolutely. So this is something I'm going to go back to, I think, a lot tonight. One of my top priorities is to implement 2 economic development tools within District 7 and wherever it might work throughout the city of Fresno. I think I've told you about this before, David. You know, enhanced infrastructure financing districts and community revitalization investment authorities. What I'm trying to do with these 2 economic development tools is recreate the mechanism by which redevelopment agencies were used to tackle blight in the district. And looking at ways we can redevelop District 7 specifically, there's a lot of blight, there's a lot of opportunity for development. We're the only landlocked district, and one of the projects that you can, one of the structures that you can implement with enhanced infrastructure financing district is affordable housing. So that'll be, again, my first thing I want to do on the city council is implement those 2 tools.
Thank you. And today, the Fresno Bee had a report from a survey released Monday that said the poor in Fresno County were spending 73% of their income on housing. And we know at the state level, finally, our leaders seem to be concerned about the fact that housing, whether you're buying a house or renting, is so expensive here. Veva, your ideas on this?
Yeah, So I think on average, some of the data that I've seen is about 45% of specifically people in Fresno are spending a third of their income on housing. And I think what's indicative of the housing and affordable housing challenge in District 7 is the amount of homeless people that we do see in the district. So I would say that there are a couple of things that we want to institutionalize. One is that as we are developing new development, we want to make sure that a good percentage of that new development is affordable housing so that we can create space. And I think that because of all of the promise of the new developments that are already coming, we want to make sure that we are not gentrifying neighborhoods. So we need to use a variety of tactics that allow poor people to stay in the communities that have been improved around them.
Brian Whelan?
I think that we have to be intellectually honest about some of the challenges we confront here in Fresno, and that Fresno itself is not an island, and that one of the things that we see is that development is heading towards Madera, development's heading out towards Clovis. We have such great abilities to incentivize development in District 7 and development in areas that are historically suffering from very high rates of poverty. I think one of the challenges that we have in the city of Fresno is that the city of Fresno, for better or worse, is perceived as very business unfriendly. And I have had the opportunity to open a business in Madera, and it was a lot easier than opening a business in Fresno. And I've also helped people that have tried to open businesses in Fresno. And I think that with respect to the housing issues, we do have to do this intelligently and incentivize developers to come to Fresno, to stay in Fresno, to develop in Fresno, and to produce units that create, well, there's a shortage of units in Fresno for people to rent, for people to buy. And so we want to make sure that Fresno is a business-friendly place where people can continue to do business and we can thrive in Fresno.
Thank you. That concludes round one, and you're watching the District 7. Did I jump the gun there?
I mean, yeah, just general comment, just going back to your comment on the 70%. For those folks who don't know, who are watching, just to put it in perspective, the report about families spending 70% of their income on housing, just for reference, I believe it's HUD that recommends you don't spend more than 30% of your income, right? So just to give folks perspective about the heavy burden that families in the district are facing.
Thank you for that. And you're watching the District 7 Forum. It's brought to you by CMAC, GVWire.com, and Fresno's leading young professionals. And District 7 is the newest district in the city of Fresno, though it's not that new. But for people that don't know, it runs right through the heart of the city, north to south, south to north, whatever your preference is. And we're going to go with our second round of questions now. And Christina Garabedian is going to lead it off, and Veva is going to answer the first question.
How will you work to tackle homelessness in your district and throughout Fresno?
It's a really
There's
good,
an easy one.
it's a really good question. Homelessness is the number one issue that is posed as I'm knocking on doors and speaking with residents of my district. I think that what is really important, again, is that we have enough shelter space and affordable housing for our homeless population. I would also like us to look upstream and think about what the root causes are that are causing so many people to be homeless in our community. So I think that we do that by having direct conversations with people who are homeless and hearing about those issues that have caused homelessness. I also feel that it's very important for us to look at those ancillary services that also would go a long way in helping to prevent people from continuing to be homeless, like making sure that we have access to behavioral health services, substance abuse treatment and recovery programs. I think there's a lot of model projects that are out there, and we need to be aspirational in how we're serving our homeless.
Brian Whelan, City Council's been struggling with homelessness for quite a while. What new thing or idea, approach would you bring to this?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily new, but I think that what has been talked about recently significantly by some of the council members who seem to have maybe evolved in their perception on solving the problem has to do with what has been developed with the San Diego projects, with these pop-up programs, pop-up housing in the, I don't know if that's a message for me or, to locate some of them next to the Poverello House. But I think that what we have to also consider in this, the dichotomy or the duality of issues is that we have the county that's involved with mental health. And so one of the things that we need to do a better job with the city is collaborate with the county to make sure that mental health services are available, because there are a tremendous amount of people that are homeless that are suffering from mental health issues. And educating and supplying them with services goes a very long way. And then we have also people that are down on their luck too. And so there are various causes of homelessness. There's maybe a 10-hour discussion we could have on the subject, but supporting some of the programs that exist with Poverello House and Rescue Mission and the vision we have with this new direction with the San Diego pop-up housing is kind of a short-term solution.
Thank you. And so Nelson, you'll get 90 seconds on this, and Veva, you'll have a chance to add in something else if you'd like to.
Well, how generous, thank you. So I believe that the chronic homelessness issue in District 7, and as well as throughout the entire city, really is a function of a lack of affordable housing. It's a function of poverty. It's a function of a failing mental health system. Some of these things which are not in the city purview, which means, like the other candidates alluded to, that, again, we need to partner with the respective agencies as council members, not be afraid to pick up the phone, call our county supervisor, call our state representatives, and work on delivering resources to address these issues. What the city can do, what the city purview is we have control over the land use, zoning, planning, and therefore I believe that it is the mandate of the city to control the spatial composition where the homeless population resides. I was not a fan of the most recent encampment ordinance that bans encampments, and that's because, months into this policy, all it seems to have done is scatter around the homeless population from one part of the city to a different part of the city. And so we need to work on creating a space for, creating a space for these folks because they are people. They're not going anywhere. They're not trash bags that you pick up in a truck and take somewhere. They are part of our city, and we need to create that space for them, or spaces throughout the city.
Thank you. Veva?
Sure, just to add that, when I met with Officer Burke Farah, who is leading the homeless task force, one of the challenges that he mentioned to me is the fact that so many people cannot actually use vouchers in order to access shelter and housing. So I think, again, what we are seeing with the growing number of homelessness in the city is really a consequence of failed policies. The camping ban is a great example of a failed policy that did nothing to ameliorate homelessness in our community.
Thank you. And that completes that round of questioning. David Taub, now you're up, and Brian Whelan, you will be first to answer.
All right, Mayor Lee Brand, in the 2016 election, only got 41% of the votes here in District 7. So candidates, I want to hear your evaluation of the mayor in his first year plus in office. And what policies of his do you agree with, and what policies do you not agree with, Mayor?
Can I object? That's a compound question.
Do you answer it?
You're allowed a compound answer.
There are policies I agree with the mayor. I think also you have to talk about the race and the number of people that voted for him in District 7. So when you consider a gubernatorial cycle versus a presidential cycle, you have a different dynamic with those that show up to vote. More people historically show up to vote in the presidential cycle, and so that kind of impacts things. And I think that by and large, the mayor, and this has been my experience over the last 8 months as I've met with people throughout the district, are very appreciative of the hard work that he's doing and the conscientious approach that he's taking to be open-eared to people's questions and concerns on both sides. And the second part of that question was,
What do you agree with him, and what do you not agree with him?
So let's go 2 minutes on this one. We're actually going along quite
Okay.
well. I'm looking at the clock, so one more minute. Nelson and Beva will have 2 minutes on evaluating Mayor Brand and where they may differ or agree.
So one of the other things in terms of maybe a difference of opinion as to the direction that the mayor has taken on something that was pretty controversial has to do with the housing inspections. I know that a lot of people in these, throughout District 7, that are tenants have complained to me about some of the conditions that they're in, and I educate them when I'm there. I say, look, you've got all of these rights, you've got a tremendous amount of rights, but there's a big gap in education, I think. And I think that one of the shortcomings that I would say is that if we could do a better job of educating people about their rights, because I know that in this district there are a tremendous amount of people that are really not well informed about what their rights are. And I think that gave rise to some confusion now that's happening with the implementation of this housing inspection program. And so I think the mayor's doing a fine job, and one of my critiques is only that it would be much better, I think, for everybody in District 7 and the entire city if there were some better efforts that were made to educate people about their rights, because I think that...
Let's
okay.
wrap it up there.
There we
Thank
go.
you. Nelson Esparza.
Sure. So when the mayor first took office, there was a couple things I was impressed with. The first was the rental housing inspection ordinance. I was impressed at the ability of the administration to bring together a range of different folks, from tenants to the apartment association, the Chamber of Commerce, just groups you don't usually see on the same side, and have them all agree that we need to tackle the slumlord issue here in Fresno. And so I tip my hat off to the administration there. I actually showed up to that meeting and spoke in support. The jury obviously is still out, and we'll see how that policy unfolds in terms of efficacy. But again, I was impressed with that ability there. The other thing I can say about the mayor, and the mayor and I are not on the same side of this District 7 race, but what I can acknowledge is that he's a listener. Because I think when he walked out of the Fresno Bee's office, and the Fresno Bee kind of asked him about sanctuary cities, and it gave I guess he had word vomit for an answer. He took the time to meet with myself, I think 25 other community leaders in his office just a few days later to clarify what really was the position of the administration on sanctuary cities, calling it a sanctuary city, and how the police department would continue to operate here. So I can say that he's a listener. What was the other part of the question here? I'm going on about it.
To evaluate
just
his
keep going,
performance,
keep going.
compare and contrast your own positions.
Sure. Well, I'm not here to attack the mayor. Again, we're on different sides of this race. When I win the race, either in June or in November, I definitely look forward to working with him. So that's my message.
There you go. Wrap it up right there. Veva?
Yeah, I think that when you understand the demographics of District 7, you can certainly understand why he only received 41% of the vote. District 7 is largely Latino, and of those Latinos, it's Latina majority who is voting. So I think in terms of areas where I agree that we need to be creative about our economic development. I agree that we need to make sure that Fresno is thriving and that it is a place where everybody is proud to call home. I think in terms of areas that I disagree, strikingly disagree, is his stance on Sanctuary City. I think everybody should be welcome. Our immigrant population contributes greatly to the city and to its success. So there is nothing wrong with making and allowing people to feel welcome. There was reference earlier about the fear that is among the immigrant community right now, and not even being able to report crime and violence that's happening to them. That's a fear that we should be dispelling and not propagating. So that would be my response.
Thank you very much for that. And Savog gets the last question of this round, and Nelson will answer first, and we're rolling along really well. I don't know what question he's going to ask, but we'll extend it to 90 seconds for the answer. So.
Thank you, Bill. And actually, Mr. Esparza brought this up a little earlier, the railroad track on Floridora. I have a specific question on that. Property owner buys a property that was long vacant, beautifies it, cleans it up, brings tenants in. Now the area is safer than before, but there's illegal dumping on the railroad track there. So a couple of times he paid out of his pocket to remove the trash from the railroads.
Personally, okay.
Finally, he had enough, so called the city blamed the railroad. Called the railroad said, that's not a priority for us. Witnessed the railroad operator stop, move the debris from the railroad track to the adjacent property. And when we brought this up to the railroad, again, not a high enough property. The easy answer is let the city go take care of it. But will you hold the railroad accountable, and what other ways can you think of to fix this illegal dumping problem? Because, mattresses and nasty couches don't make the area appealing and don't bring in investment.
So let's be clear here. How would you hold the railroads accountable? I know that's pretty hard to do, but then ideas about illegal dumping and enforcement of it.
Sure, absolutely. So I live, again, less than a quarter mile, right down from the railroad tracks on Floridora. So I see this, every day coming home, leaving to work. And that's a very specific situation that this that was submitted as far as the question. I would say that the buck stopped with me as the city councilman. I have not had experience, wrangling with the railroad. But I can tell you, again, when it comes to either partnering with the city, when it comes to partnering with Caltrans, when it comes to partnering with the railroads, we have to hold ourselves accountable as elected officials. You have to remember that you represent a community of 70,000 plus people, and they didn't elect you to pass the buck and blame the railroad or blame Caltrans when the freeway's dirty. So if we had to, and if I had to, My cheesy campaign slogan is building Fresno's future together. What I mean by that is that while I may be the face of the district, I'm counting on all the neighbors to be behind me and help me out. And if that means showing up to help me out on a Saturday morning, once every 4 weeks or once every 6 weeks to clean this stuff up ourselves, let's do it. Roll our sleeves up and knock it out. And that's really where my level of public service has. That's where my passion for public service comes from. Rolling your sleeves up, getting down and dirty, do your part, but also keep working from the top, the bottom down, impact policy.
Thank you. Beva?
Yeah, I'd have to say that I don't think it's the responsibility of residents to get down and dirty. I think that there is a mutually beneficial opportunity here. The railroad certainly doesn't want trash on their tracks. There could be some danger to that. Residents who live in that area don't want trash bringing down their property values, creating, depressing their property values and depressing themselves. So I think that, part of our task as council members is definitely to be leaders and to engage in those conversations with industry about how this is mutually beneficial and how we should be working in partnership to make sure that those railroad tracks stay clean. So I do think that there is opportunity in strength-based approaches to find out, what it is that we can contribute, what it is that the railroad can contribute in order to help keep them safe and clean.
Thank you. And Brian, last word on this, at least for tonight.
Thank you. I have maybe a difference of opinion on two of the things that both the other candidates mentioned, not to the residents to get down and dirty, and then the buck stops with me. I think that the community really needs to be responsible in a more significant way, and I've witnessed that in different parts of the district where people take it upon themselves to help with looking out for their neighbors, help with looking out for illegal dumping, help with cleaning up, help with reporting things. I think it really is about the community having to step up to the plate and getting a little more engaged. There are a lot of people that I meet with that are a little bit apathetic, I would say, kind of disengaged. Part of my mission is to lift up neighborhoods by the human capital that exists in these neighborhoods, the people. And so if the people aren't reporting dumping or aren't helping with that process, then City Hall's not going to know about it. And with respect to the railroad, that's one of many examples. There's also people are passing the buck off on FID because the canal is there, or other landowners that have interests in the district, and there's illegal dumping that's going on. I do believe that government is there to help, but I don't think government is the only solution to this problem. I think that people have to get a little more involved, and that's something that I'm trying to do now, and it is taking off.
Okay, so now we come to something we tried with the District 3 debate, and that's where we throw a topic out to the candidates, and hopefully I won't have to police you, but I will jump in if I have to. We want to hear you just discuss, and you know, it's one of the big ones, and that's being talked about in Fresno, and it just starts basically like this. A parks tax, a public safety tax are being talked about for the November ballot. Do you support one, both, none, and why? And maybe, hey, what do we need? How do we get these things addressed, and have at it?
So just jump into
Yeah.
it. So I know that right now our parks are suffering. There's no question about it. I think that the latest number was something like 100 million in deferred maintenance. 45 million is, you know, sprinklers that need to be replaced. And it's an issue. It's a significant issue. But I've also seen some of the polling that's been done about both of these taxes that are being proposed, the public safety tax and also the parks tax. And it's not without a lot of reflection and thought about this, because some of these people in the district, specifically those that reside in the 93701 zip code, that's the highest concentration of poverty in the country. And so imposing on people a tax where it impacts them in a much more significant way than other places in the district it's not an easy ask. But I realize that with respect to public safety, there's a real and pressing need to address public safety issues, because we have not yet returned to where we were prior to the recession with respect to the police and fire staffing numbers. And so after a lot of reflection and thought, I would support a public safety tax so long as there is a sunset provision on that, and that's where the funds go, and then work towards addressing issues with the parks. I know that parks play a very significant role in reducing crime. In fact, the Romaine Park, when they cleaned that up and citizens got more involved in that, the crime was reduced in the area around it. And as a board member at Storyland and Playland, I know what the community is capable of doing, because I was involved in leading a community effort to get those parks back open.
Beva?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys aren't really in
Yeah.
the spirit. I didn't have to
So
do anything with the
Romaine Park
threes.
was cleaned up by Building Healthy Communities, who has been a longtime partner of Cultiva la Salud. And I am in favor of Fresno Parks, because I think that it not only will bring in the resources needed to better maintain and to improve and expand our park space in District 7, but it'll add to it arts, and it'll add to it youth employment opportunities through the Park Ranger program. So these are all assets that would be incredibly beautiful. And I think that, you know, my heart and head is big enough to understand that we need parks and that we need police. And, you know, Brian mentioned that police haven't been restored to their pre-funding recession levels. Well, neither has parks. So I think that we need to be efficient with the use of our existing budget, and we need to make sure that we're positioning ourselves creatively to draw down those additional resources. We have a bond measure coming up in June. The only way we'll be able to benefit with that bond measure is if we have the matching dollars to support it. So this is the beauty of the Parks Initiative, is that it will allow us to have that revenue that will let us match the potential bond monies that are also coming down.
So crazy guy, the guy was absolutely crazy, that would be me, said they ought to go together on one unified proposal. Nelson, is that crazy, or does that make sense?
That is not crazy. I think that's a very pragmatic idea, but the fact that you know, that does not seem to be unfolding that way, that's just politics in Fresno, right? And you know, I want to stress, right, that we need to be more collaborative, right? I think there was probably a missed opportunity there to really do something. But I want to stress to the folks in my district who are watching this, when it comes to measures or ordinances or any kind of initiative that is going to impact my pocketbook, your pocketbook, those are not decisions I take lightly. And those are not decisions I will make without consulting the people in my districts. I've publicly committed already to holding 3 town halls you know, per year as the city council member in District number 7. And the purpose of those will be to, again, have a continued line of open communication about what folks in the district really want. Both parks and public safety are something that are near and dear to the heart of residents in District 7, and it's two things that we do desperately need, as two examples of the lack of public investment that the district has received over the last couple decades. And on a personal basis, right? Me being somebody who lives in the district, I think one of the questions earlier both of my opponents disagreed. And I think it's clear that I'm the candidate that walks among the people in my district, not in front of them with my back to them. I personally am willing to fork out the extra. What I think the parks was, they're saying 10 cents per day or some figure like that, and an extra quarter cents on a sales tax to make sure that my community is safer, to make sure that we create green space for my daughter, all the children in our district, and that's me as a personal person.
So let's
individual.
wrap it there. You raised a new issue in that discussion, how you would communicate with constituents. Veva and Brian, you get 30 seconds if you wish to talk about that.
Yeah. So I believe in one-to-one contact. It's why I'm knocking on doors. It's why I'm phone banking and calling every day. I think that, I would definitely continue to leave those lines open. I do want to use social media. I think it's been very effective for, in particular, the various generations living within District 7. And I would love to do coffee times and tea times. I don't think it necessarily needs to be just 3 times a year. I think that there are emerging and pressing issues that present themselves, and we would want to have special forums to allow people to help share ideas and share concerns. So having open avenues of communication that are ongoing would be important, and then bringing together residents at forums would be a great idea. And lastly, I plan to attend all of the wonderful cultural celebrations that we have in the district, and that's another great opportunity to listen and hear to my constituents.
Brian?
Yes, one of the things that I've been doing over the last 8 months is trying to restart, and reform some of the neighborhood watch programs that exist throughout the district. And I had a kind of a launch event, not this past Sunday, but the one before, where we gathered people throughout the district to come together and become neighborhood watch captains. And out of that, what I'm going to do is almost establish kind of like neighborhood councils, where people come together instead of just via Twitter or email or what have you, have FaceTime with one another and be involved in creating groups that restore kind of a sense of community on a street-by-street basis, with the idea that the community can be more united. And through that process of establishing those groups and reestablishing neighborhood watch programs, I hope to be in a position to more adeptly serve those that I'm hoping to represent.
Thank you. And
Bill, may I take a stab at that 30-second piece? I guess I opened the door.
Well,
but
I
I
mean,
didn't
you
get to-
opened the door and we gave you extra time. You opened up communication.
I didn't know that was going to be a question, but I just want to note that no candidate in this race has knocked on more doors in District 7 than I have, and no other candidate in this race puts their cell phone on every single piece of
I know, but
campaign
how
literature that I
is
do.
that verifiable? I think every candidate will tell me they've worn out 9 pairs of shoes. Their knuckles are bleeding every night. So we're going to end that there. We know all of you are working hard. You don't enter and do all this if you aren't serious about it. So we're halfway through the debate. If you want to kind of stand up and flex your muscles a little bit, you have an opportunity to do that. Also, on your chairs, you saw this survey, and at GV Wire, we've been polling via social media, and Drew Phelps, our research director, goes to great strides to make sure that our polling, our research is very accurate. It's what he was trained to do, it's what he went to college to do, and so we encourage you to fill this out so that we can present to the public priorities for District 7. And please mark whether you live in the district or you don't. That's very important. So now we're going to go to round 3, and thank you all for keeping us right on time. We talked about the railroad earlier. Well, we're running this railroad on time. And David Taub leads off, and Veva, you get to take David Taub's question first.
Candidates, tonight we're here at the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno, and they're known to help refugees, resettle refugees, especially in the last couple of years from Syria. So my question to you is, should Fresno become an area that helps resettle refugees, just like the Hmong in the 70s and 80s? Should there be more refugee resettlement in this town?
Well, I want to acknowledge that, this debate could have happened in District 7, and it's not. But of all of the places to have it, I can't think of a better place that demonstrates the inclusion and diversity that we as a city of Fresno should be embracing. So I believe that, we as Americans have a history of opening up our doors and allowing immigrants, our poor and our huddled masses to come to our country. And that shouldn't change. I think that we should definitely be open to embracing new immigrants, people of other faiths, LGBTQ. There's a diversity of people who are vulnerable and who have been marred, in our political discourse. So I definitely feel that allowing refugees who are in need to resettle in our community would be important.
Thank you. Brian?
So my name may not give this away, but I am half Latino also. I think there's a lot of Latinos on the stage. My grandparents are from Argentina, and they came here seeking opportunities. And in fact, my first language was Spanish, and out of that I found a love for other languages, including tried to learn Farsi for a while and also Arabic. And I believe that immigrants are the backbone of our society, and one of the things that I would like to do is to help those that are here. In fact, I offered my services as an attorney if it were of necessity or need for those that are resettling from Syria, if there was a need to help out. And I really do believe that we are a country of immigrants, and we need to support immigrants that are coming here to have a productive and successful life.
Nelson?
Sure. So David, as you were asking that question, should Fresno become, you kind of, I was already forecasting what you were going to say. We already are, we already have been a community that has embraced, these refugees, embraced these communities. And I don't know about others, but I speak for myself when I say that I want to live in a city that, that welcomes others with open arms. And I think the refugees that we have taken in this city throughout the years have enriched and diversified our community in such a great way. And, Fresno would not be Fresno without those communities. So looking, forecasting to the next 10, 20, 30 years, I believe we should keep that open arms policy.
Thank you. And so now let's go to, let me see who gets this one. Savog leads off, and the first person taking the question will be Brian.
So Manchester Mall is much different now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago when I used to go hang out there. What plans do you have to continue to make Manchester and that area thrive and become a safe place for youth to go to?
So Manchester is obviously privately owned, and I think that what we need to do is create an environment where private enterprise can succeed in the city of Fresno. And I met with the owner of Manchester when he came out to kind of show off the project to some of the people that were interested in renting spaces. And it's a really exciting thing that's happening. I see Manchester every day when I drive home, and it has made tremendous improvements. And I think that it's a testament to really the great direction that Fresno is going in when the private enterprise partners with the city, or the city makes it more feasible to do business. And so the other thing too that's pretty interesting about Manchester is that Manchester struck a deal with the police where they give them rent for free, and so that created a substation in Manchester where now there's about 80 or 85 police officers there, and that has helped the crime statistics in the neighborhood and in the area. So give the businesses a chance to succeed, a chance to open, and a chance to stay open.
Thank you for that. And Tori, what was the total time there? Okay, so pretty close to the mark. Nelson, your crack at Manchester Center.
Sure, absolutely. So when it comes to District 7, because of the eclectic mix of neighborhoods, they're sometimes for residents it's tough to pinpoint that point of pride in our community. Like Tower District in District 1 and downtown in District 3. And for us in District 7, Manchester is really one of those points of pride of a good many. And actually, there was a funny story about how the silhouette of Manchester is actually on my campaign logo, and that's how proud I am to have it in my district. I know some of you are laughing, but that's really. When it comes to Manchester, again, I think Brian alluded to it being a private entity, but again, looking at what can the city do to facilitate that activity there, as far as business-friendly policies and even things like the transportation system and supporting the BRT to make sure that folks from all across the city have access to Manchester and not just the folks directly in our neighborhood, because we want to bring people together, and I think transportation and making sure folks can have access is big.
Beva?
The potential of Manchester is awesome. When I meet with residents in my district, one of the things that they talk about is having to leave the district in order to go to get some unique cuisine, entertainment, listen to some music. And so I see the promise of Manchester potentially expanding to become that point of destination for residents of District 7. I can see arts, I can see entertainment, and I can see that wonderful cuisine coming there. One of the things that I think we do need to be responsible and thoughtful about is the fact that there are merchants in Manchester who are going to be displaced. And those are merchants who have stuck through the tough times. And now that there is economic development, they should be the same merchants who should be able to prosper from that boom as well. So I would want to make sure that we are developing it in a way that serves our community and that serves the business owners who have been there.
So you've raised an interesting point. I'd like to hear from Brian and Nelson on that. Is there a role for government? And through Veva, what are you thinking of? Incentives or subsidies? What do you envision to stop merchants from being forced out there? If you could briefly give us the idea, and then let's have Brian and Nelson react to that and maybe present their own proposals.
Well, I think, one of the comments that was made recently by our mayor was the flavor of Fulton changing as a result of the investments that are there. And I think that, that flavor shouldn't be gone, that you should be able to still hear and feel and savor that flavor of the variety of diverse merchants that are there. So I think we do that by, helping them with their costs, their overhead, some type of tax incentive for staying and being an established merchant in the area. I think whatever we can do to support and incentivize them to continue to stay and maybe mitigate some of the overhead and costs for them would be important.
Brian?
I would disagree with that as a solution there. Manchester is a private enterprise, unlike the Fulton Mall where we had a street that was reopened. And I don't think that, unfortunately there are conditions that exist in the business world, and sometimes businesses fail. If those conditions that come about and the businesses fail is the product of the city having done something wrong, then there's the concept of inverse condemnation. So people can get their just compensation for whatever's at taking. But in the context of Manchester, I know that it was very difficult to negotiate with some of the tenants to move or relocate or go through different leases or contracts. But I really think that one of the things that's sacred in our Constitution is the right to contract. And I don't want to see the city or the government start to interfere in those private contracts, because I think it does everybody a tremendous disservice.
So we'll cut it there. Nelson gets his opportunity if he wishes.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, again, while Manchester is a private entity, I will be a council member who believes that nothing is zero-sum. And I think there's an opportunity there could be an opportunity if you work, structured it correctly to provide incentives. And to be clear on business incentives, my position on that is as long as the city is handing out, business incentives, I support them for small businesses. The city has put forward some outrageous proposals to give away tons of tax revenue to these huge corporations. And I don't understand why why we don't help out our small businesses that already exist here in the city.
So this is turning kind of into our free-for-all format, and we can adjust on the fly.
Yeah.
Veva, you wanted to say something
Yeah,
else?
you know, a couple of things. You know, my focus is on District 7 and the business owners who have been, you know, the backbone of the economy there. I think that's where our priority needs to be. You know, I've heard Brian reference a couple of different times while we've been debating about the Constitution, and I want to remind people that it was the Constitution that didn't allow women to vote, and it was the Constitution that only recognized some people to be 3/4 of human beings. Unjust laws are not laws that we should be forced to follow. And I think that we need to create the type of community that, again, honors our residents and our merchants.
Brian?
I think it's, we have a difference of opinion on that subject, to
That's
put it-
why we're having this
to put
forum.
it diplomatically, but, you know, I think that there is a process for laws to be created, and we follow in this country the rule of law, and when the laws need to be changed, there's a process. It's a legislative process. And I think that part of the problem is that when we have the government interfere in basic things such as contracts, that it can create an unfair situation that picks winners and losers incorrectly. So with the situation with Manchester, there are businesses that are doing well as a result of the changes. There are businesses that are failing as a result of the changes. As the taxpayer or as the steward of the taxpayers, propping the ones up because of the private enterprise disputes, I think that's the wrong move. And when the Constitution talks about these different issues, yeah, there's been an evolution in the Constitution. There have been amendments, and there's a process to amend it and change it. And I think that's really, to be fair to everybody, how it should be happening.
And so we'll leave it there. Christina Garabedian has been waiting very patiently, and she leads off the questions, and Nelson will answer first.
So marijuana has been a hot button topic for a while. Do you support the sale of recreational marijuana within the city of Fresno?
And,
Why or why not?
And you're going to get 2 minutes on this one, recognizing the complexity.
When people in the city bring up the topic of recreational marijuana dispensaries, I see the color green, pun intended, because my first thought is, how many police officers could we hire with that with that sales tax revenue? How much of the $100 million plus on deferred maintenance of parks could we cut into with that sales tax revenue? What kind of infrastructure could we provide? How many streetlights could we put up? How many potholes could we fill if we had that revenue? And so, to remind folks throughout our city, recreational marijuana is now legalized, and it's up to us. It's incumbent upon us as a city to responsibly govern how they operate within our city. If marijuana dispensaries are going to operate as freely as liquor stores in District 7 or any part of our city, I'm not going to support that. But again, nothing is zero sum. We can figure this out. Myself and 6 other council members, and figure out the spatial distribution of where these dispensaries are going to go, and capitalize on that opportunity to, again, you see that increased revenue and increased level of public investment that District 7 so desperately needs.
Thank you. Veva?
So California voters approved medical and recreational marijuana, and I believe that it's the responsibility as elected officials for us to figure out how to make sure that it's operated responsibly. It's legal. It's already in our community, so we need to make sure that we regulate it and we implement it fairly. And that means that we do learn from our lessons in relation to oversaturation of liquor stores, just like the oversaturation of payday lenders. No neighborhood should be saturated with dispensaries. However, everyone should have an equal opportunity for the business development that the dispensaries will bring. And I think in particular, as a point of equity, those communities, Black and brown communities who have suffered the brunt of unfair legal processes, should be able to develop and engage in this as a business opportunity. So that's my stance, long and short.
Brian?
I know that there's two arguments in terms of the medicinal and the recreational. I think that we need to create rules that help those get the medicines that are necessary for them to address their conditions. But in terms of the recreation, I have a difference of opinion. My view on that is one that's informed by basically my background, and in terms of having taken a couple of oaths. In fact, when we all signed up to be candidates here, we all took oaths to uphold the Constitution. And my concern is that federally it's against the law, okay? And so investing in these enterprises presents a problem when it comes to whether or not that investment is going to result in divestment, or whether that the Attorney General of the United States is going to start targeting people that are getting too big. What has to happen is there has to be a federal solution before that can go forward, in my view. So in terms of the recreation, I understand that there's a big and blossoming black market, and I'm opposed to things that violate the law, and that shouldn't happen. But in terms of the solution, I think that we have to fix the law before we can have that conversation.
Okay, so we have about 4 or 5 minutes here, and what I wanted to throw out, and we'll have Veva lead it off, but really I want you to talk back and forth, and no speeches, have a real discussion here like you were over dinner. And that is simply this: what are your yardsticks for assessing the community health of District 7, and what are some of your ideas on how to get there?
So, as a public health advocate, I think that there are a number of things that we look at in the district to think about whether we are creating a healthy community. District 7, as we know, is park poor. District 7 has higher concentrations of liquor stores and fast food restaurants. Those two things alone create sedate lifestyles, and they create unhealthy diets. So my interest, as we're looking at building the infrastructure of District 7, is to make sure that we're creating the infrastructure improvements that allow people to ride their bike, enjoy a walk in the evening, have a park that their children can go to recreate. We want to make sure that we are creating just as easy access to the healthy foods that we are to the unhealthy. So that would be helping to support community gardens, bringing in farmers markets, allowing people a business venture, as we've been doing with Cultiva la Salud. We've created a micro business opportunity for low-income immigrant women to sell fruits and vegetables back into their neighborhoods. This is able to happen because we established the first certified community kitchen in Fresno on Belmont in partnership with Food Commons Fresno. So I think when we look at the health status of District 7, what we're going to find currently is that 1 out of every 3 children in the district is overweight or obese. We have a higher rate of diabetes. Half of all children born as of 2010 who are African American and Latino will develop diabetes in their lifetime. That's shameful. We should not, as a community, allow that to happen. We want people to be productive and healthy, and so we need to create those investments that allow people to eat better and move more.
So Brian, what would your yardsticks be for a healthy, thriving District 7?
Well, I think it's important to empower the neighbors to get the neighborhoods more engaged and involved in public safety issues. I was walking I forget the precinct number, not too long ago, and I actually walked through a drug deal at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I was looking down at my walk sheets, and 30 minutes later, across the street, there was a shooting and a 14-year-old girl was hit by a stray bullet. And so, I think that health is absolutely important, but I think that there are some extreme pressing needs to address drug houses, to address some of these attractive nuisances that exist in our community, in our backyards. I was even talking to another neighbor that was telling me that she was teaching a student, and the student left for a period of time because the student was with the mother that was involved in prostitution, and the mother wouldn't let the student go because she was concerned about there being an issue with being held basically for hostage for the money. There's crime that is in this area that is extremely violent and that is extremely dangerous. And it's a rare night that I'll go to sleep without hearing the helicopters that are overhead. And so what I want to do is I want to get people engaged in these different programs and also collaborate with solving these urgent problems.
Very good. And Nelson, you want to jump in? And then Beva had her hand up as well.
I very much do.
Okay.
So I, as a candidate, want to actually talk about things that the city can do, right, that impact community health, and not these pie in the sky, maybe state or federal government ideas. What the city, again, what's in the city's purview, parks, right? Parks and trails for folks to walk and have recreational activities. The freeways that cut through 3 different ways through our district, and I mean those communities, those surrounding communities that have to breathe that air. My family is one of those, right? The quality of housing, our slumlords, and making sure we're holding them accountable so that folks aren't breathing in molds, and kids have a warm place to sleep at night. Sidewalks and streetlights so that folks can literally walk down the street without having to worry over tripping over a cracked raised sidewalk because the tree roots have lifted it up. Public safety so that you actually feel comfortable being able to walk down those sidewalks, and of course jobs, which will uplift our communities and families by allowing those families to have income and have access to the small businesses, have access to the healthy food that the one other candidate referred to. So these are things the city can have a role in that actually will have an impact. We're not running for state assembly here, we're running for city council.
Okay, so Randy Reed, he tells me I have to keep things moving here. If you want to address that in your closing statements, everybody is free to do so. And we go back to Christina Garabedian again, and Veva will answer her question first.
So if you were able to get, I know you've said you've raised a lot of money, but if you were able to get a $5 million grant for your district, what would you do with the money?
Yeah. So I think that we need to turn and bundle that $5 million in ways that would create greater business opportunity, that in turn would employ more people and continue to perpetuate economic development in the district. So when we talk about the development of infrastructure projects, those are projects that will employ people. So whether it's helping to incentivize small business development, helping to build infrastructure for those needs that I spoke to about sidewalks and streetlights and parks, those are all ways that we can generate more economic development by creating more business and more employment opportunity. So that's how I would like to use it.
So Brian, that sounds pretty good. First day in office, $5 million grants on your desk.
Sign me up. There's a need for investment in parks, especially in our area, and that's something that if there was a $5 million grant could make an impact immediately, especially a couple of the parks that come to mind that are not too far off from McLean that suffer from a lack of care, basically. But also with that, employ park rangers. I think that would be a great way to address a need to take care of these parks. So beautifying parks, taking care of the parks, I think that's a great option with $5 million that lands on the desk on the first day.
Thank you. Nelson?
Sure. So some of the answers I've heard so far in this question, I think have been pretty short-sighted. I think if I had a $5 million windfall, fall into my lap, and I had some influence over how it was going to be used, I'd want to use it in such a way where we're compounding and we're getting some residual added value out of it. I want it to be a gift that keeps on giving. And so if we had a $5 million windfall, I'd want to utilize that in conjunction again with the infrastructure financing districts I mentioned earlier, the community revitalization investment authorities I mentioned earlier. Invest in a blighted property, and there are many of those in District 7. We wouldn't know where to start, but what would happen is after we've created after we've revitalized that property, it turns to a business or affordable housing, whatever it might be, the property value of that building will increase. And the gift that keeps on giving is that the tax revenue we're going to receive from that added value, property taxes, will go into a fund where that will be reinvested in another blighted area.
Thank you for that. And now we turn to Savog. And Brian will answer first.
So my question is regarding inoperable vehicles. There's nothing like having a birthday party and guests coming over and they can't park in front of your house because someone has a car with flats sitting in front of it, or guests come over and you've got a car on blocks in a driveway not too far from you and they wonder, where did I come? My question is, would you support code sweeps, and what creative ways can you think of to help educate people that broken down cars don't belong in streets or driveways for long periods of time?
Brian, before you answer, Savag IW, the king of retail politics. Thanks for the question.
Can I, sorry, Bill, but I have to respond. I want to say that it's not just with District 7. There's this issue all over the city of Fresno.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
So one thing that happens in front of my house, or has from time to time, is actually people will steal cars and they'll park them in front of my house to see if there's low jack, which is a GPS device, and if there is, then the police will come pick it up, and if there's not, then they'll come back and they'll go junk it or do what they're going to do. I think there's a bigger issue too there, is that sometimes the cars are getting stolen and they're being parked in different places throughout the district. And one of the issues that came up when we were starting this neighborhood watch program is that the chief asked how many people here have had their car stolen, and over half of the people that were there responded that they or their spouse had their car stolen. So I think a lot of it has to do with theft of cars that is happening in the area, even though I know that the statistics on that car theft have gone down. But in terms of code enforcement and making sure that people are addressing that problem, absolutely, I support that. I think that when you've got these cars that are stolen or run down, broken out in the front yard, and they violated code, let's enforce the policies that we have on the books.
Nelson?
Sure, absolutely. So this is, again, a problem throughout the city, but in District 7 as well. I had a lot of neighbors, my conversations complained to me about this issue. I do support, you call it a code enforcement sweep, contingent upon, we got to go through and give a fair warning to folks. I think while we have laws and the laws got to be followed, there are a lot of folks in the district who see themselves as victims of code enforcement, right? And so, hey, let's give them the warning shot, and it's up to them to comply going forward. But there are, in some rare cases, some legitimate reasons, right? So I talked to a gentleman at his door, had his Jeep parked up literally right almost in front of his front door. And he told me, I didn't ask him about it, he lent this to me. He said, hey, I know this is a code enforcement violation, but every time I leave my car on the street, it gets broken into. And that goes back into our conversation about public safety. And all of this folds back into, everything at City Hall boils down to dollars. And I'd love to see code enforcement sweeps and us doing it the right way so we're not harming folks. But we got to find a way to create the resources and get the revenue to actually make that happen.
Beva?
Did you specifically ask about stolen cars, or no? Okay,
No,
I didn't think you did.
Inoperable cars.
Inoperable cars, yes. So, we have already, in various different formats, mentioned the poverty that we have in District 7. I don't know about you, but when your car breaks down unexpectedly, you don't always have the cash savings somewhere in order to do the repair. So I think that, what we would want to do definitely is, again, figure out why those vehicles are there, see if there are ways to help support those residents in removing that vehicle. Maybe they need it to be towed. Maybe they don't have a way to have it towed away from their home, things like that. So I think it would be responsible of us as council members to figure, again, what is the root cause of that. And, in terms of the sweeps, again, I do think that it is important for us to maintain a vibrant and clean neighborhood. When we don't, our property values go down and people get, their morals also go down as well. So I think that the sweeps could be a good idea, but I would agree that we would want to do that in a responsible way.
Thank you. And so now, David Taub.
Candidates, would you support using public funds to build a new stadium for Fresno Foxes? And where would you put that stadium?
And Nelson gets to tackle that one first.
Fun. Public funds to build a new stadium for what? I'm sorry.
For the Foxes?
Okay.
That's a soccer team. Everybody doesn't know.
You know, in my economics courses, I teach literally a whole week or two on the externalities, both positive and negative, and we use stadiums as one of the examples, right? I think ultimately that is going to be a decision I have to make based on harder data, and you know, there are obviously appropriate ways of finding that information. There are pros and cons, no doubt. There are costs and benefits, but.
So what's your answer?
My answer is, if I found it to be more of a net benefit than net loss for the city, then yes. If not, then probably not. Again, contingent upon the data, the numbers, and of course, community input is the most important thing to me as a council member.
Beva, what about soccer in Fresno?
I love soccer. I can't wait for the World Cup. Man, I'm excited about it. So I think that we have a growing soccer community here, if not already well established, and we want to be able to support that. I think there are soccer fans, soccer parents who want to make sure that we're investing in the infrastructure development that serves their sport as well. I'm a proponent of using what we have. So I would want to first see if there's any double use of stadiums, arenas that we currently have that could be maximized before we invest in developing something new. And I think if we move into developing something new, that we want to make sure that we have a clear way and mechanism for which that is going to be paid for, and that we're not transferring the burden of that cost onto our residents.
Thank you. Brian?
I think we do have a lot of resources already within the city of Fresno. Ratcliffe Stadium, for instance, in District 7. We could use that. I know I've talked to the, I'm not sure if it's one of the owners of the Foxes, but he was talking about, actually at the event that we were both at, the Fresno Downtown Club, the attendance levels there were between 5,000 and I think maybe 9,000. I want to use the resources that we already have to make sure that there is not an overspending of money. For instance, with Chachansey Park, we still owe a lot of money on that project. And so to harken back to the World Cup, when the World Cup exhibition games were played in Fresno with Brazil, and there was, I think, Sweden and Mexico, those games were held at Fresno State. And so I think that we have resources now. If there's a need for resources later to accommodate the growth of the Foxes, which I hope happens, then we should have that conversation at that point.
Thank you. And now we have time for an extra question before we go to our closing statements, and it comes from the audience here tonight. Other questions that I posed came via social media and email. And very simply, would you support a Veterans Commission that would assist in coordination of services within the city? We are one of the last major cities in America to do so. Beva?
Well, I happen to live by a veterans hospital, and I can tell you that one of the challenges we have is the overflow parking from staff and veterans trying to get services there. So I, as the sister of two veterans, I want to see us invest in honoring the service of our military. So I'm definitely pro wanting to see those resources come that would allow us to meet the needs of people leaving the military and integrating back into our communities. You know, unfortunately, I don't think that that has been our history. We do have a number of veterans who are homeless, and I think that's a travesty. So we need to do better by our veterans.
Brian, what about a Veterans Commission?
Yes.
There we go. First one-word answer of the night. Thank you. Nelson?
Sure. In short, my answer is absolutely. I'm a strong believer in the social capital of community, and I think you know, I believe, right, and giving back to those who have given, you know, so much to us, right, whether that be veterans in our city, right, if there's a role that the city can play in assisting those folks, then we should explore that, you know, and that value of mine transcends all different levels, right? I think even when it comes to, we're not on the subject of seniors, right? But even when it comes to senior citizens, I believe in, you know, giving back to those who have given so much to Fresno, right? And we should have a public senior center. So that's just a general value of mine. Absolutely.
Senior Center raised quickly. Either of the other two candidates want to talk about Senior Center?
It's a resource that we desperately need, and we should definitely establish a senior center.
Brian?
I also agree with that, and I know that in Manchester, there is a center there. I think that there's a willingness and desire to have a devoted facility to that, and I know that I've had conversations with, I believe it's Ed Cashin, who was talking about doing just that in that area, and so I'd like to explore that further to see if there's an opportunity to, I think it was Dakota and Blackstone area. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And so, audience, we have breaking news tonight. Regardless of who wins, the occupant of District 7 seat is going to advocate for a Veterans Commission for the city of Fresno and do their darndest to make sure that a senior center opens. So, we got news tonight. It's not just a regular forum. And so now, each of you, we said 45 or 1 minute for your closing statement. We actually, you have enough time for 90 seconds. And we'll start with Brian on that.
Thank you all for coming and for listening to our various points of view. It's my extreme honor to get to know a lot of people throughout District 7, and it's my sincere hope that I am the servant for District 7. My goal, whether I win, lose, or draw this election, is to really lift up neighborhoods, and I'm doing that now. It is an urgent issue that needs to be addressed throughout District 7, which is getting the community more engaged in solving some of our issues, specifically public safety. And so if there is something that I've said that you're wanting to find out more about, or there's information that you want to learn about, please reach out to me through the website, wheelinforfresno.com. And find out more about the campaign. I really do believe that we as a community can come together and lift up neighborhoods in District 7. For that reason, the mayor and the chief of police, the fire union, the police union, and some of the other business leaders and community leaders in Fresno have come together to support this campaign because they believe that I would be a responsible steward of the people's resources and also for those that I hope to represent. So I thank you all very much for your time and attention, to all of the panelists, to Mr. McEwen, and to GV Wire for putting this on. Thank you very much.
Nelson Esparza, make your case to the voters of District 7.
Absolutely. To all those folks, excuse me, to all those folks who live in District 7, who are listening, you know, those who I represent already in my current capacity, and those who I look forward to representing, I want you to know that I value, you know, representative government as one of the fundamental pillars of our democracy in this country, and that when you elect me to represent you at the City Council dais, your voice comes with me, because I think most of you know that when I'm speaking to the constituents, not the audience, but most of you know that I've knocked on your doors several times over. You have free range access to me, and your input will be heard and considered. So, you know, I ask for your support, and I look forward to continuing my representation of this community.
Thank you. Beva?
Well, I want to address a point that I didn't get to respond to, and that is that if you listened to Brian's responses about District 7, the crime, the violence, the break-in, the car theft, it's a very sad portrait. I assure you that District 7 is not that. We are a hardworking, honest people who deserve investments. And I think that language, it justifies the continued disinvestment in the district that's already been neglected for far too long. I'm running to represent...
Before you go to your closing statement, I have to give Brian an opportunity to respond on that, if he wishes.
Sure. I would just say I've lived in the district going on 10 years. Ms. Islas just moved into the district. And so there's an experience that I have, that I come to bear on this process, that is one of impact on over a decade basis. And so I do believe very, very much that the people in this district are great people and have the great capacity to do great things. And so any disparaging comments to the contrary, I take exception, but I believe in and uniting the community to lift up the district.
Beva, you get the last word.
Yes, I've lived in the district for quite some time throughout my life. I am not new to the district. I've been working in the district for over a decade. That's undeniable. You should vote for me, not just because I'm a woman. You should vote for me because I'm the best qualified person for this position. I have been an advocate for residents of the district for a very long time. I've been involved in advocating for the general plan. I've been involved in the active transportation plan for the city. I was involved in the recent Parks Master Plan. I was involved in the active transportation plan. I am on record for over a decade of trying to drive equity and investments to this district. Neither of my opponents can say that. My opponents will talk about what they want to do, and I'm the only candidate up here that can talk to the achievements I've already made. Joint use initiatives that unlock the campuses of 16 schools here in Fresno was through our efforts, combined with BHC and Cultiva la Salud. The city is investing $1.2 million. So I submit to you that I am not a candidate who is up here because I see this as a stepping stone. I am up here because I am invested in the community that I was born in.
Thank you. Nelson?
Very quickly.
Better be.
Very quickly. This opponent just contended that, we have not worked for toward any investment in District 7. I've worked during my tenure on the county school board so far, worked very closely with Superintendent Jimmy Ovino to make sure that we open CTech, Career Tech High School this August 2018. And I'm very proud of that accomplishments that the County Office of Education has undertaken, and I look forward to picking up the mantle on those types of projects at the City Council level.
Thank you to all the candidates. Thank you to Brian Harley and the entire CMAC team. Thank you to Imam Sayed Ali Ghazvini and Reza Nekumanish of the Islamic Cultural Center, to Elena Woodhams and Nina Waste of Fresno's leading young professionals, to our panelists, Savog Tadiosian of the Central Valley Ledger, Christina Garabedian of Fresno's leading young professionals, and to GV Wire senior reporter David Taub. Also to our 3 District 7 candidates, Nelson Esparza, Viva Islas, and Brian Whelan. And thanks for watching. Be sure to check out gvwire.com and watch the replays of this forum on CMAX, Comcast, and AT&T channels. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.